Hi, it's Roz, and I'm here to do a tag. And the tag I'm doing is Shawn the Book Maniac's new latest alphabet soup book tag, and it's F is for fiction. And I really love Shawn's alphabet soup book tags. They're really the prompts are such fun, and they take you off in lots of different directions, and they give you the opportunity to kind of enthuse about books that you loved and moan about ones that you didn't. So he's smart like that. Unlike some tags that are a bit kind of predictable. And he cheats though, because he said that he was going to try and make his alphabet soup book tags like not have too many questions, and so he was kind of keeping to 10 questions, and then the first question for this one has actually got 3 parts, so it's 13 questions really, but we'll let him off because they're lovely. So the first question is F is for fictionalize, and it's any or all of 3 things. First, your take on autofiction. Secondly, the writer you'd like to write a novel based on your life. And C, a work of autobiographical fiction you'd recommend. What is autofiction? Now, I understand what autobiographical fiction is, and it's actually a genre I quite like. So, you know, an author takes things that have happened in their own life, but rather than just writing a straight memoir or autobiography, they fictionalize it, so they turn it into a novel, and that makes sense to me. It's like, you know, real life is kind of messy and has boring bits, and if you turn it into a novel, you can kind of crystallize it around the more interesting bits, or really home in on a particular area, or protect perhaps living members of your family that you wouldn't want to upset by literally writing your autobiography. I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of reasons for fictionalizing your own story, aren't there? And one of the first books I think of that kind that I read, and this is like a long time ago, was Empire of the Sun by J.G. Ballard. Now this is based on his experiences as a child, as a Japanese prisoner of war, but he turns it into, you know, and you couldn't possibly remember in the level of detail that he has in this book your memories of being a child. I'm not putting that very well, you know what I mean, like our childhood memories are a bit more episodic, but obviously he's built on those memories and done some research and talked to people and written what is an absolutely fascinating, passionate and interesting autobiographical novel. Yeah. Another one that I'm really going to recommend is Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga. Yeah, I think that's right. And that it's always, I think it was the first novel to be published by a black woman from Zimbabwe. When she wrote it, I think it was still Rhodesia. So it's autobiographical fiction. So she's taking her childhood and young womanhood, you know, sort of late childhood and young womanhood, growing up, getting kind of educational chances that took her away from her family, and all the kind of pressures that put on her, how the nervous conditions is because of the sort of impact that had on her mental health, I guess. Warmly recommend that as a book. And she just relatively recently brought out the sequel, which I must get and read. Definitely a goodie. Now, that's autobiographical fiction, but what on earth is autofiction? What's the difference? I have a feeling it's almost like an excuse to write autobiographical fiction that isn't, where you don't actually bother to turn it into a good novel. You just kind of pour it all in, but you can get away with what you've written because you're saying, oh well, it's kind of fiction, but is it autobiographical? I don't know. I don't really understand. It's like, feels like it's a kind of current fashion for calling things autofiction and what's the difference. The one book I think that I've read that I think would be defined as autofiction now is Outline by Rachel Cusk, which I read recently, and that was quite a good book. Like the reason I think it's autofiction is so she's writing it and as if it's herself. The main character is a writer. It's a writer who's teaching on a creative writing course, and it's as if she's just sort of telling you about the day-to-day events of the week of that creative writing course and what she gets the students to do and like what happens in the evening. I think that's autofiction. Who knows? It was not a bad book actually. But I'm not really attracted by your kind of now scarred and people like that that definitely write your sort of trendy autofiction. Yeah, it doesn't appeal to me. Now, who would I like to write a novel based on my life? Well, that I do know. I would like it to be written by Marguerite Yourcenar, who wrote Memoirs of Hadrian. This is not because I feel that I'm like a Roman emperor, but because this is definitely one of the absolute best novels I've ever written in that kind of subgenre that is a pretend memoir, pretend autobiography. So, she writes it as if she's Hadrian writing his own life story. It's written, very much in the first person, and boy, does she do a good job. And I would love her to write the story of my life, because she would turn it into something interesting for a start, when it's probably relatively dull. Not for me, obviously. I love my life, but for anyone else it would be dull. But she would turn it into something fascinating. She would do that in the most beautiful style that you could possibly wish for. But best of all, she would do it in French, so most of the people who knew me won't get to read it, so I'm safe. The only problem with that plan is that she died quite a long time ago, but all of that was question 1, and that was 7 minutes. That's terrible. I have to go faster, won't I? Question 2, F is for Farm, a great book set on a farm or about farming, or one you want to read. When I started thinking about this, I realised that I actually read quite a lot of books that are kind of set on farms. I didn't realise that. I had a whole list that I could have picked, and Harvest by Jim Crace was quite high on the list. But the one that I've gone for is The Twin by Gerbrand Bakker. So that's a Dutch author, and he wrote it in 2006, but then it was translated, and I think it might actually have won the inaugural international Booker Prize. I say that a bit vaguely. I'm not sure. I think so. Really, I was going to say I really enjoyed this book. Actually, it's kind of almost a book you don't enjoy. It's like you kind of, it's kind of bleak, and it's very much conjuring up the atmosphere of those flat bits of the Netherlands where, boy, you wouldn't want to be a farmer. It's like cows and dikes and yeah, misery. That's the book, and he kind of the main character in it comes to really hate his father and really hate the farm and really hate all of it. Having said that, it's an excellent book, and I would warmly recommend it. Question 3. F is for Frank, Franz, Franny, or some other writer that you recommend or want to read whose first or last name starts with F, and bonus points for first and last. I looked. The only person I could think of with the first and last name beginning with F was Ford Mannix Ford, and I know other people would choose that, although warmly recommend them. So instead, I've chosen, where are we? One author whose first name begins with F and one author whose surname begins with F. The author whose first name begins with F is, now I've got to get this right, it's such a good name, Fiston Mwanza Mujila. Fiston, isn't that a good first name? Fiston wrote Tram 83, which is a wonderfully odd, sort of nasty and yet fascinating, delightful, exciting very satisfying novel set in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is where Fiston's from. Yeah, well worth a read, but don't expect, again, not a book that you kind of enjoy, but a book that you relish, I think. Although it's quite sexist. Yeah, women in it don't come off tremendously well, but you know, I shouldn't go about that, because obviously that's something I feel quite strongly about, but it didn't ruin the book for me, put it that way. The book, the author with a surname beginning with F that I would recommend is Penelope Fitzgerald. Now, Penelope Fitzgerald is one of those wonderful English or British women writers of the 20th century who are just so elegant and write so well in a kind of subtle, undemonstrative but brilliant style. The Beginning of Spring is one of hers. The Blue Flower is another brilliant one. Like Elizabeth Bowen or Elizabeth Taylor, or well, there's a whole string of them. And she's a kind of a more modern version of that kind of beautiful quality of writing that I really like. So those were my authors beginning with F. Oh, now F, number 4. F is for the love of God. An experience of extreme exasperation while reading, about a book in its entirety or a smaller section thereof. That is a very Shawn question, isn't it? A very Shawn prompt. One book recently that absolutely had that effect on me was Ghost Walk by Sarah Moss, because it started so well. It's about this kind of experimental archaeology project where these people go and pretend to live in the Iron Age, you know, and there's a kind of father-daughter thing going on, and the archaeologists and the archaeology students, and you know, and I just think, oh, I thought I was going to love it. It absolutely. I loved the scenery. The writing was actually really quite good. And then about 2/3 of the way through, it just became completely and utterly ridiculous. Didn't utterly ruin the book for me, because the other elements of it were so good, but it just, you know when you just think, what's happening here? They wouldn't do that. Why would someone go along with that? That's just not real. So that's my For the Love of God book. Yeah. Next one, F is for Find, a book with lots of F's in the title. Bonus points for more than 2. I couldn't find any with more than 2. I was struggling to find. Obviously don't really like books with F's in the title. I found one with 2, which is The Far Field, by Vijay. Oh, what's her surname? Madhuri Vijay, that's it. And funnily enough, that is another of those books that could have qualified for the previous prompt as a For the Love of God book, because again, I really thought I was going to like that book a lot. It's the author's from Bangalore. She writes about a young woman from Bangalore who is kind of dealing with bereavement and deals with that by going to Kashmir, and it's really, obviously, the author really wants to sort of write interestingly about I'm trying to think of how to, like the political and social situation in Kashmir, and how the sort of Indian government has really kind of shat upon the Kashmiris, but they're kind of torn between India and Pakistan, and it's a kind of complicated, one of those complicated sort of situations. And that book had so much going for it, and again, it just really went off the boil and became quite ridiculous. So that's 2 F's. But it's sad to pick a book that you didn't really like. So I'm going to have a second F book, which only has 1 F in it. No, actually, It has two as well, but still only two. Couldn't get to more than two, which is Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, and Russian author. And I had to pick that because any opportunity that I get, any excuse to tell people to read Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, I have to grab it. So it's got two F's. Read this book when you've got a bit of spare time because it's a bit long, but it's extraordinary and lovely. It's like sometimes it gets described as the modern War and Peace. I don't know. It's epic, but beautiful and fascinating. There we go. That's my F books. Now, our next prompt, F is for father, a work of fiction in which fatherhood is a central concern. And my choice for this is Silas Marner by George Eliot. Because when you think about it, fathers are absolutely key in that book, and ideas of fatherhood, being a father, relationships between fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, and I won't go into it in great detail, but one of the lovely things about the book is that, like, the most successful kind of father in the book is a foster father, because Silas Marner finds redemption for himself and joy and in being a really wonderful father to a little girl who's let down by her own father, and kind of winds up on his doorstep. And yeah, it's a lovely story by George Eliot. I do, again, want to read if you haven't. That was F is for prompt number 7 is F is for Finland. Now, one of the reasons why I absolutely had to get on and do this tag is because Shawn chose Finland because he likes to kind of push people to kind of have to look for perhaps a country, some authors that they don't know so well, or to hunt it out. So it's a book that's set in Finland or by a Finnish author that you'd recommend or would like to try and find out about one if needs be. It'll be fun. And one of my favourite authors is from Finland, so this was like a gift for me. And that author is Tove Jansson. Now, I don't know if you read, when you were a child, her books about the Moomins. There's one, Moominland Midwinter, probably the best one. Here's another, Finn Family Moomin Troll. You can tell how much I loved this book as a child by how many times it was read, and the fact that it's now it's actually missing the first 19 pages, which is really sad, but I still haven't thrown it away because it's kind of like a precious thing from my childhood. Now, you might think, oh, cute, moomin creatures, ooh, sweetie, soppy, no. She was a really interesting and complex woman who wrote these books for children that are might appear on one level to be like charming fantasy with these kind of curious, kind of quirky characters and these sort of, yeah, big fat hippo-like moomin things. But actually, these are very dark elements. She covers sort of depression in a way that is very like adult and yet appropriate for children, which is a very clever thing, I think. Self-discovery, family relationships. Yeah. As an adult, I then discovered that she wrote some adult books too, and I'm going to particularly recommend The Summer Book, which I think is the best of her books for adults. And Steve, who read this just recently, said it's got like a Zen grandma in it. So this book is like a grandma and her grandchild on an island. Zen grandma on an island. That's what this book is. It's very simple, calm, intricate. Nothing big happens, and yet it's a tremendous book. There we go. 8. F is a fangirl, a new or new to you writer you're really excited about. Okay, so my new excited about writer of the last kind of 6 months is Clarice Lispector, and I've talked about her a couple of times on here before, so I won't go on about her. But I'm definitely a Clarice Lispector fangirl. I've got hopes for another. I'm about to read a book soon by Samantha Schweblin, and I'm really hoping that she might be my new fangirl thing. We'll see. If you've read her, please tell me if you think she might be. Number 9, F is for fling. You loved one book by this author but nothing else. Now, my pick for this is a book called Talesa. And Talesa was written by Lani Vent Young. And Lani Vent Young is from Samoa. And you may know, if you've watched this channel a bit, is that I have a bit of a thing going to read a book by an author from every country. And books from Samoa are few and far between. So I found myself reading this book, Talesa, which is like basically kind of young adult fantasy, which is not my normal cup of tea, if I'm honest. But I actually really enjoyed the book. This girl, the main character in it, she kind of moves back to Samoa from the States to stay with her grandmother. I think it's grandmothers again. And she kind of discovers she has this power where, you know, when she gets angry, she becomes really hot and fire comes flying out of her fingers, and she'll frazzle people. Yeah, it is in some ways as silly as that sounds, but it's also really, I could see that for a teenage girl, it's kind of quite an empowering book, and it really draws on Samoan culture. So I had a lot of fun reading it, but I wouldn't read another because it's you know, one was enough. I could enjoy one, and that was my fling. Number 10, question number 10, last question. F is for Friends, a novel that satisfyingly explores friendship. Now, I'm cheating here because I've picked 3, but I'll do them really quickly. Because I think friendships really change, don't they, at different stages of your life. And my book for friendship amongst girls, and it's quite nasty in a way, is Cat's Eyes by Margaret Atwood. It's one of the best depictions I've ever seen of how mean and tricky but intense girlhood friendships can be. Then my book for kind of young adult friendship is The Garden of the Finzi Continis, Italian book set in the kind of run up to World War II, and it's about being Jewish in Ferrara at that time, but this kind of group of young people are invited to they're excluded from the tennis club because of race, so this family, the Finzi Continis, who are very aristocratic, kind of invite these other young people, this group of young people, to come and play tennis in their house, and they kind of form friendships. And then it's also that thing where at that age where are you friends but with someone of the opposite sex, or are you actually falling in love with them? What's the relationship really? And then there's a whole class thing. And yeah, good book, one I'd recommend. And then I'm going to end with a book that's about friendship in older age. Not old age, but older age, which is A Quartet in Autumn by Barbara Pym, because friendships are just as interesting at whatever age, aren't they? So that's my F is for Fiction tag. Now, and I'm not great about tagging people, you know. I should. So I think I'm going to say, in a slightly cheaty way, if you watch this, consider yourself tagged, and enjoy it, because it's a great tag to do, and don't wait to be named individually, just go for it. That's kind of one of Shawn's kind of approaches, and I'm going to cheat and borrow it. That was fun. See you all soon.